Explicit acts has been a thing in video games for a while. I mean, a lot of our favorite games include some type of explicit acts or nudity in them. Games like the GTA series, Baldur's Gate 3, The Witcher 3, and many more includes the act of intercourse in them. And while some games don't include intercourse outright, they still include some sexual elements to them, mostly seen in their main characters. Characters such as Bayonetta and Lara Croft are two of the most popular video game female characters, and they are known for being considered by many to be really good looking or sexy. While Lara Croft in the newer games have been shown to be covered up more, back in the day from the videos I've seen, she was shown to be a bit more, what's the word, alluring. I mean, there was an Easter egg of her about to take a shower then shooting at the camera, poking just a little bit of fun of those who wanted to see her naked. Now Bayonetta on the other hand never really switched up. She always remained very seductive over the years. I mean, she's always doing splits like a stripper mid-combat. She saved this guy in the most oddly hottest way possible. That's the only way I can describe it, and I don't even know what to call this. But the reason why I included those games is because while one character is known to be very good looking and the other one being very alluring and also good looking, those games never outright included any sexual intercourse in them. Now, am I mad about this? Fuck no. I mean, despite my content, I'm not a degenerate, but I was still curious on why some mature rated games don't include any, super explicit, stuff in them, and this led me back to the Souls games. Now, the Souls games are some of my favorite games of all time. I've said this a million times. I mean, the first time I played Dark Souls 3 and finished it, I felt like I transitioned from a boy to a man. And I've went on and completed all the other Souls games many times, and I've also dabbled into some Souls-likes here and there because these games have my favorite combat style of all time in gaming. It's like crack, I just need more of it. Not that I do crack, you know what I mean. Now, we're not here to talk about the combat or gameplay, and as you can tell by the title of the video, I'm going to be talking about the lack of sex in these games, specifically the Souls games. Okay, so I know what you might be thinking. Why is sex the first thing you think of when playing the Souls games? To answer that, all I have to say is that's not true. This was only something I recently thought about. Now, the real reason why this came to my mind in the first place was because usually RPGs, especially ones that are set in a dark fantasy setting, tends to have a lot of nudity and other sexual aspects about them, especially the Japanese ones. Even outside of video games, series such as Game of Thrones and Berserk are both set in a fantasy-like setting, and yet they for sure don't shy away from depicting sex. So I wanted to go over three major things in this video. One, why does FromSoft shy away from depicting super explicit, acts in their games? 2, why them doing this might actually be for the better, and 3, will their future titles include any depictions of sexual acts in them? Let's start with the first question. Why do they shy away from depicting super explicit acts in the Souls games, especially since it's something that obviously exists in their universe? Look, I know that sounds stupid, but what I mean is that they obviously have characters that are very, sexual if you read the lore. Two characters come to mind, Fia the Deathbed Companion and Ariana the Woman of the Night. Now obviously there are many other characters that have sex throughout the games if you want to use lore. For example, Gwynevere, the Witch of Izalith, and many more, but it would be dumb to include them since it's just based on them having a bunch of children. It isn't stated anywhere that, hey, the Witch of Izalith had a train ran on her by Gwyn and his knights or some shit. Now, Fia and Ariana are the only two characters I can think of when it comes on to sex being hinted at in a Souls game. Now, another question related to the main one I want to answer is, do FromSoft hate the idea of sex being in their video games? To answer that sub-question, let's get back to the two characters, starting with Fia. Fia is a deathbed companion, and the title seems to be given to certain people in the Elden Ring universe, Fia being one of them. They usually comfort champions of all kind and suck their life force out of them until they are dead, and then after that they go lay with an undead that they want to bring back to life through birth. That's why you see her sleeping next to a dead person in the opening cinematic, and also why you see her sleeping next to Godwyn's, body after completing her quest line. Now, while it doesn't outright state that she has physical intercourse with said undead, I think it's more of an allegory for it. She lays beside them and gives birth to them after some time. It's definitely sex, but magic and shit. Our next character is Ariana. What makes Ariana special is because it is outright stated that she is, well, a prostitute. FromSoft made sure to make the players know of this as well. She even referred to herself as a quote-unquote whore, which at the time I didn't think too much about, but then realized that, she is the first character in a Souls game to outright mention that she has sex. A lot of it, based on her profession. If I remember correctly, Ariana's questline can end in two ways. The first one involving a nun Adela who seems really nice at first, but after a while tries to tell the player to stay away from Ariana because, well, she's a prostitute. But after getting to know the character some more, you start to realize that, damn, maybe Adele is tripping and just a jealous bitch. I mean, Ariana seems to be chilling, minding her own business. Yeah, she's a prostitute, but that doesn't make her lesser than anyone else. At the end of the questline, Adela, overcome by jealousy, kills Ariana and seems to be going crazy and even tries to kill you. Now, the different ending of Ariana's questline basically involves her getting impregnated by a Great One and having its baby, or whatever the hell you want to call this, which is weird and somewhat ironic since she's a prostitute and someone who is most likely looked down upon by society, and yet she is the one that this Great One chooses to have its child. A being so powerful and incomprehensible and most likely think of humans as lowly, yet he chose her who humans sees as lowly to have its child. Sure, she doesn't want it, and by it I mean the child, since she had it against her will, but it's still interesting to think about. Now, how does this ties back to the sub-question of, do FromSoft hate the idea of sex being in their video games? To answer that, I honestly don't think so. The Souls games seem to look at sex and birth as not a bad thing but something great. Apart from the Ariana questline thing, because she was freaked out by that abomination of a child. But then again, FromSoft seemed to have a positive outlook on sex since, for example, Ariana was a prostitute and Adela was a nun, both coming off as nice people. However, due to different opposing professions, they have different views of the world. Most would think that Adela being a nun is the more sane and quote-unquote cleaner one, and Ariana to be the opposite. However, it was flipped all along. Ariana was a nice and always stayed that way, even talking to the chapel dweller, which surprised even him because, I mean, look at him. But Adela not only showed jealousy many times by bad-talking Ariana, but she let it consume her and she killed Ariana, then tried to kill you afterwards. So now that we know that FromSoft seems to have a positive outlook on the idea of sex, to answer the main question, why do they shy away from actually showing it? Well, in my opinion, I think it's because it's just not their style. It probably isn't something that will fit in the type of story FromSoft, more specifically Miyazaki, wants to tell. And this leads us to the other important thing I wanted to go over, and that being why the absence of super explicit acts in the Souls games might actually be for the better. FromSoft has consistently steered clear of explicit sexual content in their games since the beginning. Consider Gwynevere, for instance. While there may be some uncertainty surrounding this, I vaguely recall a post or a video discussing where Gwynevere's prominent features were not supposed to be so huge. If I remember correctly, Miyazaki mentioned that someone, perhaps another dev or director, made certain adjustments without his knowledge. I guess a lot of Dark Souls fans owe this guy a lot of praise, and another thing, Miyazaki's a better man than me for real, because if it was me developing that shit, I would make every character have big ass and titties. Okay, I'm joking. I'm not joking. Why bring this up? Well, it appears Miyazaki didn't want such, let's just say, explicit content. I wouldn't even say that's like explicit, but you know what I mean. I don't think he wanted that in the game for a reason. I assume he aimed to craft a world known for its maturity and perhaps excluding overly sexual elements such as Gwynevere's, chest was his way of achieving that. But then what about Quelaag and her sister? They literally have no top on and the only thing covering their breasts are strands of hair. So we can kick the maturity answer out the window, right? Well, kinda, but not really, because first of all, something can definitely be mature and have some sexual elements to it. I mean, that's one of the whole point of being mature. Being mature doesn't mean avoiding all sexual elements. Many games earn an M rating due to violence and sexual references. However, an excess amount of these elements can sometimes make a work feel immature, almost like a teenager writing a story saturated with, sex and violence, portraying these themes in an absurd and ridiculous manner. Maybe Miyazaki didn't want this for Dark Souls and the rest of the games, so he thought that maybe Gwynevere breast being too big was an issue, but then again, it probably wasn't. You see, maybe the initial design of Gwynevere just had medium-sized chest and nothing too crazy, but then someone did their own adjustments and made them really big, and Miyazaki, probably seeing this, didn't really care too much. But then again, this brings me back to the question on why I think FromSoft not showing super explicit things in their games might be for the better. Now that I think about it, I feel like including super sexual things or elements in their games might seem a bit out of place for the type of story they're trying to tell. Imagine, let's say you're playing Elden Ring for the first time. You're traveling across Limgrave and you then find yourself lost in the woods. You keep walking until you stumble upon a cabin. Some strange sounds are coming from that cabin. Us, the players, are confused to what those sounds may be. Our mind already has an idea, but from playing the previous games, you're like, nah, it can't be, right? You then make your way inside this cabin only for a cutscene to play out of nowhere. Then boom, you see Radagon giving, I don't know, Marika backshots or some shit. You see, it just comes off as shocking or surprising, and personally, with the type of tone the Souls games are going for, I don't think this would be a super good thing. So it all just boils down back to tone. However, this brings me to my final question. Will FromSoft ever include the depiction of, explicit acts in their future games? Souls games to be specific. Personally, I don't know. Now, could the depiction of intercourse fit in their future titles? I definitely think so, if they have a specific tone they're going for, sure. I can definitely see how a more story-focused Souls game can definitely include a little, one-on-one action in it. In conclusion, the absence of explicit sexual content in the Souls games appears to be a deliberate choice, aligning with the tone and narrative style that Miyazaki aimed to convey. Again, while some characters and lore hint at sexual elements, the games refrain from depicting sexual acts. The decision may be rooted in Miyazaki's desire to maintain a mature and serious atmosphere in the storytelling, avoiding excessive or gratuitous, sexual content that could potentially detract from the overall experience. While other popular games may incorporate explicit sexual content, the Souls series distinguishes itself by relying on subtlety and leaving certain aspects, to the player's imagination. This restraint may contribute to the game's success and global appeal, allowing players to project their own interpretations onto the narrative. As for the future, whether FromSoft will ever include depictions of intercourse in their titles, it remains uncertain. Given the studio's commitment to storytelling and evolving, narratives, it's possible that they might include more intimate themes, only if they again align with that specific tone that they were going for.